Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather with us tonight. It's the 12th of December. As always, we encourage you to visit weather.gov. Click on Alaska to take you to your nearest Weather Service office in Alaska that will serve your community and village. You can also look at the statewide view at arh.noaa.gov. Give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office in Alaska on Twitter under NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, or NWS Juneau. Or if you'd like to get statewide alerts as well, NWS Alaska will do the trick. You can find our Weather Service information on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska. Many of you have already done that as you go through your weekend and have snow pictures, whether you're in Southeast, you're in South Central, or you're in the interior. We would love to see those. Post them to our wall, and perhaps we'll reshare those here on the show or on our Facebook page. After the show, you can get the entire broadcast of the show, what you're watching right now, and kind of if you watch that over while you're playing the YouTube, you kind of get one of those mirror effects going. But if you watch the show on YouTube afterwards, or if you come in late, you can catch it there on Alaska Public. Just go to youtube.com and at the top of the bar type AKWX-TV, short for Alaska Weather TV. It's a way to watch the entire broadcast, maybe when you miss it on your favorite PBS channel. Or if you like kind of a shorter version of that in the mid-afternoon, just to get a tease of what we're thinking about earlier in the day, about 3:30, 4 o'clock or so, you can find that on our YouTube page. NWS Anchorage is where you'll find that also on the TV weather page at weather.gov/Anchorage. A whole lot of ways to get the information you're about to receive right now. So sit back, relax, and let's talk weather a little bit. For southeastern Alaska, most of the big winter weather has started to fall apart. At least for now. Rain and snow is still falling in many areas of southeastern Alaska. Had some heavier rainfall moving across the southern parts of southeast. You'll see why when we check the temperatures here in just a little bit. But already across the Haynesboro and the Klondike Highway, Taya Inlet area, another winter storm watch has been posted as we head into Friday night and Saturday for the potential for accumulating snow there. It looks like some areas will be dealing with at least another perhaps accumulating snow event there as we get into Friday night and Saturday morning. Some places as much as 8 to 16 inches before that shifts back over to more of a rain event. So this is something that we're watching. It's not a warning yet. So again, just kind of watch out, keep your eyes on it. More to come, and watch this space for more information. As we look at South Central Alaska, a lot's hidden by kind of the smaller view of the map here around Prince William Sound in South Central. We have a blizzard warning up for Thompson Pass. Areas there starting especially Friday night and into Saturday could be looking at 12 to 24 inches of snow. But of course that's compounded by being in the pass with some stronger winds from the north and east that could blow 30 to 40 miles per hour. Obviously that brings a great reduction in visibility, so travel through Thompson Pass could be very difficult, if not impossible at times. So be extra careful, and maybe check your plans if you're driving through that area in the near future. For the Copper River Basin, 8 to 16 inches of snow possible there for a winter weather advisory that starts up as we head into Friday and Saturday. It's mainly going to be along and south of a line from east to west up to about Glen Allen or so, because the snow is moving in from south to north. So snow will be increasing in that direction, but the advisory is primarily for areas south of Glen Allen, again for about 8 to 16 inches of snow. And then, of course, there's the Anchorage area, and we're watching for snow to develop. We've already had some rounds of light snow moving through. Most of that was really confined to the hillside areas where there's been any sizable accumulation. Most of it hasn't been that sizable at all. But there's another wave coming, and as we get into Friday night and Saturday, snow rates will start to pick up there, and we're probably looking at an opportunity of 6 to 10 inches of snow as we go through Friday night and into Saturday there. So you will see accumulating snow in the Anchorage area, and just under that red dot, I assure you, is a colored-in spot for Anchorage for a winter weather advisory. Looking farther north still, winter weather advisories continue for a large part of the interior. We're still looking at blowing winds, probably from the north and east there, that could reach wind chill, that could bring with it wind chills down to about 35 to 40 below in some cases. So plan on that. And some gusty winds through that area today brought winds up to about 30, 35 miles per hour in some cases. That also was creating some trouble for some pilots, especially higher flying pilots. There is some more high altitude turbulence issues throughout the day. Expect that to continue through the weekend, and there could be some severe reports probably in that same area where we're watching for the winter weather advisories again through the weekend. So a lot going on in the interior, south central, and southeast. Let's turn our attention way out to the west then. We've got our swirl of moisture here south of Unalaska. This is the storm that is going to bring some snow to south central and eventually southeast once again, but we're going to focus a little bit farther west. The next wave behind that is running into a ridge of high pressure across eastern Asia and the Kamchatka Peninsula. You can see that the ridge of high pressure is parked right about here, and with that it is trying to bring in a southerly flow, but that's on the backside of this deep cold that's obscuring a large part of the Bering Sea. You can see that flow moving off of the west coast of Alaska, northeasterly flow moving through the Chukchi Sea right now. That will likely close off the Bering Strait perhaps as early as the end of this weekend, according to our sea ice program there at the Anchorage Forecast Center. I apologize, grabbed the wrong images for you tonight, but the rest of the show should be just fine. This is the low-tech version of our satellite picture. You used to look at this all the time, but this one is without labels. You'll notice around south central, you got a handful of clouds there across the Talkeetnas and into the Cook Inlet Range. A little bit of clearer skies in some cases south and east of the Kenai Peninsula today, but a lot of that was filling in rapidly. This giant band of cloud cover that you see to the south is that next storm, that leading edge we just saw, that's moving northward with warmer and wetter air. But none of this here is warm and wet, so it is cold and dry, and all this moisture moving northward over that should produce a good opportunity for snow for a large part of south central Alaska, and again for the Copper River Basin, and eventually more areas perhaps across the extreme northern parts of southeastern Alaska. Watch the loop one more time, and you can see that onshore flow as the frontal passage is moving over southeast. Things really start to dry out for southeast Alaska this afternoon. Still some decent amounts of rain here across southern parts of southeast. Back to the west, things are pretty dry there. A cold, dry northerly flow coming down the west coast, and still some residual moisture here north of the Alaska Range. Not a whole lot of snow falling there. We've seen a few isolated snow showers around the region, but by and large it's the winds that are really creating the weather issue there for the interior and the North Slope in some cases as well today. Here's a look at the weather map, and we put this into kind of the color mode there with the right maps in place. The low right now with a cold front sweeping off the continent at 988 millibars. Here's our front earlier this afternoon working right through southeastern Alaska. Still some rain and snow for the southeastern archipelago. Some snow was falling across the Copper River Basin, but by and large most of what the rest of Alaska was seeing, if you're along the Yukon River, the Kuskokwim points north, chances are it was a relatively dry day. Might have been a little bit breezy at times around the Pribilofs today, and for areas in Prince William Sound, wind gusts were over 40, 45 miles per hour. A few select places made it up to about 55 miles per hour today around Cape Romanzoff and areas out to the west. You'll notice high pressure parked across the Arctic coast at 1,043 millibars. That is helping to push a lot of cold and dry air out to sea, chipping away at that Bering Sea fog monster just a little bit. As we get into tonight, spotty snow showers possible all the way from Bristol Bay along the chain and also across the Pribilofs, St. Matthew Island waters. You'll see a few snow showers north of Kodiak Island, maybe on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula, the Copper River Basin, probably around the Talkeetnas and along the mountains there east of Anchorage. But by and large, again, a lot of that will settle down until we get back into the daytime tomorrow, probably midday to afternoon before that starts to crank up once again. And for southeast, again, there's still a possibility for some snow as the frontal boundary should park very close to the region there, probably south of Juneau, north of Petersburg, keeping the bulk of that snow chance mainly in the northern third or so. For southeast, there's still some periods of rain, or rain may mix with snow across the southern parts of southeast. But the bulk of that next surge is still well to our south, with the 976 millibar low across the central and western Gulf. Watch what happens as we get into Friday afternoon. Wow, that takes a pretty hard jog northward, and with that surge comes moisture pouring over that colder and drier air. Really good setup for snow to develop in the afternoon again, especially in south central. And the winds are still going to be going as well, so watch for blowing and drifting snow. This is the issue that we're concerned about with Thompson Pass, so a blizzard warning goes into effect there. And for southeast, more rain and probably more snow, especially for areas around the Haynesboro and the Klondike Highway. What we're seeing out across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern parts of the chain, generally light snow, snow showers and some fog there. Drier, colder air still pouring off through Norton Sound, Unalakleet, Seward Peninsula, looking at relatively dry conditions, but cold with high pressure up across Barrow. You can see that's around 1,023 millibars. Don't be surprised if you run into some snow showers there along the west coast and the Chukchi Seacoast especially, but with that north and easterly flow, the Bering Strait likely closing off here at least by early next week. As we get into Saturday, the low is parked fairly close to, if not right over Whittier. That's a pretty good setup for starting up snow across the Anchorage area, the western side of the Kenai Peninsula into the Mat-Su and the Talkeetna Range. So there will be some times that the snow could probably be called heavy at times around south central. So be prepared for that Friday night and into Saturday morning especially. As the front's parked just north of the Gulf Coast, we'll keep the cold air banked up right against the Chilkoot Range and Chilkoot and White Pass area, I should say, and that will likely start to shift over the pattern from snow into more of a rainy pattern for southeast. So watch for some changes there, very close to that low circulation at 974 millibars. And then again, more rain coming in behind that front, at least briefly, before it comes to an end on Saturday. Snow showers still scattered across the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern chain, and the west coast, all the way up through, well, almost Nome and the Bering Strait. Most of the North Slope probably dry, but there will be some areas of fog, of course, with high pressure locking in that low moisture, and just cold kind of weather will continue with that cold and dry flow wrapping all the way down into places like Bethel and Unalakleet, and once again the areas around Dillingham and just points west. So watch for some cold weather there and blowing and drifting snow across the interior as we get through the weekend, as it wraps all into this very large and healthy weather maker over Alaska. All right, afternoon temperatures now. Southeast, where was the rain? All you have to do is look for the temperatures that were in the 40s there. Look at that, low to mid 40s for Heidelberg, Ketchikan, and that Ketchikan itself was pretty mild at 45. Just up the road in Hyder, 32 degrees, Juneau 25, Haines 19. This is where the core of that snow was. Into Yukon, you see temperatures that were hovering very close to zero, 29 in Yakutat, Prince William Sound. Cold and windy today, 20s and 30s there if you get out to Middleton Island, that is. Everywhere else in the teens around the Kenai Peninsula, 12 in Kenai, 14 in Anchorage and Palmer and Wasilla area, 3 in Talkeetna, single-digit territory for Fairbanks, Healy, Greeley, Tanana, Nenana. Everybody was chilly. Even Eagle at 10 below. However, Anaktuvuk Pass and Arctic Village had you beat with temperatures approaching 30 below there in Anaktuvuk Pass earlier today. 15 to about 26 below, depending on where you were in the North Slope. Around Kotzebue Sound, we saw mostly single digits there. Around Kivalina, 5 degrees. Shishmaref, 16, 12 in Nome. Around Unalakleet, it was 12 degrees. Grayling saw temperatures in the single digits as well. McGrath, about 4. Bethel was at 11. Cape Newingham, all the way out toward King Salmon and Dillingham, looking at temps fairly close to 10 degrees. Kodiak, 22. Mostly we're looking at readings in the 20s around Cold Bay and False Pass earlier today. Sandpoint about 28, Chignik 25, 31 in Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, and around the Pribilofs, upper 20s did the trick with mid to upper 30s for the central and western parts of the chain. Shemya showing 37, down to 33 there tonight. St. Paul at 25, Nunivak Island single digits, Nome going to 5 below. Most of the central and eastern interior anywhere from 15 to as cold as 36 below in Eagle tonight. The wind should be pretty calm with a temperature like that. 13 below in Kaktovik. It looks like Barrow at 15 below. Southeast considerably warmer in the 20s and 30s. A few exceptions there. Heidelberg might make it to 40 with south central looking at readings generally in the single digits, anywhere from about 0 to 5 above. Prince William Sound in the teens. Cordova 26, 17 in Kodiak with highs there tomorrow at 26. The interior back to 5 to as cold as 22 below. There's going to be a healthy dose of cold air sitting over you tomorrow. 5 to 15 below across the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound looking at temperatures from 12 in Shishmaref to 0, maybe even 1 below around Kivalina. and Kotzebue, 10 above in Nome, most of Southwest and the Bristol Bay and the YK Delta looking at readings that are above 0 if you're on the coast and below 0 if you're a little bit further inland toward McGrath at 10 below. 28 in Kodiak, teens and 20s for most of the Alaska Peninsula and 30s for the Aleutians, with South Central back in the teens. Flying weather tomorrow is going to be a little sketchy across the North Slope. Expect IFR conditions there mainly east of Barrow out toward Kaktovik, right along the coast. And of course, across the Gulf Coast, southeast, Prince William Sound, and parts of southeastern Alaska itself will be under IFR conditions, with IFR also mainly south of the Pribilofs, west of Cape Newingham, all the way to Unalaska Dutch Harbor and the southern tip of the Alaskan Peninsula. The interior, by and large, unless you're running into a ground blizzard, should be okay. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass are both expected to be VFR conditions tomorrow. Lake Clerc and Merrill Pass also VFR, visual flight rule for Rainy Pass and Windy Pass as we get into your Friday. Isabel Pass should maintain VFR. Same goes for Mentasta Pass. Tanita Pass looks good, but when we get into Portage Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions develop during the day, with the western side maintaining VFR at least through midday and maybe some change during the afternoon. A lot of that's going to take shape on the mountain. So again, if you're coming in from the east side, things will look a lot worse than what you'll find on the west side. Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions develop as the day goes on. Surface freezing line has taken a pretty hard jog southward. Don't see that changing anytime soon, but the warm and wet air will be lifting northward. Freezing lines mainly around Sitka. Points southward, you see that rising from about 2,000 feet up to about 8,000 feet out across the Pacific Northwest. Icing potential, there is some. A lot of what we were seeing today was across southeast, the northern parts of the Gulf and the Cook Inlet, anywhere above 4,000 feet to below 10,000 feet. Most of that reaching moderate or light to isolated moderate levels earlier in the day. We expect more of the same tomorrow. The jet stream also shows us clearly that cold air wants to take over Alaska, and it has and will continue to do so through the weekend. An impulse of energy coming across southwestern Alaska is riding a jet stream over 70 knots across south central, with the main core of the jet a little bit farther south across the Gulf. That's keeping the weather moving over southeastern Alaska right now in the form of rain and snow. At 9,000 feet, our low pressure system moving across the Alaska Peninsula keeps some healthy winds behind it, anywhere from 50 to 55 knots coming in from the north along the west coast and also out ahead of it. Winds up to 70 knots coming into southeastern Alaska. You can see some stronger winds also moving through at this level through the interior. At 3,000 feet, low pressure is a little bit more ahead of the game here and already into the Gulf by tomorrow morning. Winds still picking up across the interior between 20 and 40 knots. Stronger winds out ahead of that moving over the Copper River Basin and southeast between 50 and 70 knots, and our northerlies across Bristol Bay remain strong at 3,000 feet. So turbulence once again pretty much in the same old place as it was today. If you didn't like today, you're probably not going to like tomorrow too much in the interior. Below 6,000 feet, there's an opportunity for isolated severe as you saw today. Occasional moderate for a large part of the Yukon Valley from tip to tail, and an even greater threat for light to isolated moderate across areas south of the Brooks Range to the Alaska Range and out across the YK Delta, and continued threats for turbulence across a large part of southeast, all areas generally below 6,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. Let's turn it over to the stargazers, and I'll be right back with your marine forecast in just a few.
Tis the season for Crescent Venus.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. Fellow stargazer Marlene Hidalgo will join us to help you find your way around the sky. So, the moon goes through phases every month.
Every what?
Month. The time it takes for the moon phases to repeat. It takes 29 and a half days to go through the full cycle, so it's not quite a month, it's a
Month. I like that.
Well, the planet Venus also goes through phases, but it takes a lot longer and the cycle is a lot more complicated.
I know. Venus and Earth are both going around the sun, but since Venus is closer, it goes faster. And when it is almost between us and the sun, you can see a crescent Venus.
And now is the perfect time to catch a crescent Venus right after sunset.
Let's show you. Before we get to Venus, we have one other little event happening. We have our sky set to December 16th at 8 p.m. facing east. The full moon is about a third of the way up in the sky.
Lower in the northeast, you'll find bright Jupiter. It'll be just above a fainter star called Wazat. That's part of the constellation Gemini. And for your reference, Orion is over there, just south of east.
Over the next couple of nights, the moon will shift toward Jupiter. Here we are on December 17th, and the moon has moved its apparent position and is now a waning gibbous.
Then, here is December 18th at 8 p.m. The moon is now just a few degrees to the right of Jupiter. Remember earlier in the year when we had monthly close encounters between the moon and Jupiter? Well, they're back.
You've probably been seeing Venus a lot after sunset. It's been low in the southwest for months and it is crazy bright. We pushed our time back a little and it is now 6:15 p.m. on December 16, and there it is, a dazzling beacon just above the horizon. Let's take a closer look with the telescope and see what's going on Venus. You might be surprised to see that Venus through a telescope is not perfectly round. In fact, you might do a double take when you first look at it. Is that the moon?
No, my friends, that is not the moon, but Venus in her crescent phase.
Normally, Venus is pretty boring in a telescope. Her clouds block us from seeing any surface features, so she looks like a blank white light. But when Venus is like this, two things are happening.
One, Venus is closer to us and thus looks larger in the telescope. Two, Venus is coming between us and the sun, so the sunlight is backlighting her, and we can only see a little crescent of light.
Speaking of crescents, the crescent moon will drift by Venus one more time in the evening sky. Mark your calendars for January 2nd, and if you have a telescope, get it ready.
We have our sky set to January 2nd, just after sunset, facing southwest. If it's really clear outside, as darkness begins to fall, you will see the waxing crescent moon no more than 10 degrees above the horizon.
As it gets darker, Venus could pop out lower in the sky.
This will all be happening very low in the southwestern sky, so it could be tough to catch.
Make sure you have a clear view of the horizon and start looking just minutes after the sun goes down.
If you have your telescope ready, take a look at Venus first, and you'll see it as the slimmest crescent. Only 3% of the side facing us will be lit by the sun. That's because in 8 short days, Venus will be between us and the sun. It won't line up perfectly like when we had the transit of Venus in 2012, but it will be just above the sun and invisible from view, until it pops out in the morning skies 8 days later.
Then check out the moon through your telescope. It'll look almost identical to Venus, except a lot bigger, with 3% of its lunar surface lit.
Wow, I gotta check that out on January 2nd. January should be a great moon.
Keep
looking up.
Time for your marine weather now. Starting in southeast, stronger southerly flow will continue across the coastal waters around 35 knots, bringing seas up to 14 to 15 feet as we go through Friday. In the inner channels, Clarence Strait looking at 35 knots with a 12-foot sea. A little bit further north toward the southern Lynn Canal and the northern areas all the way up toward Haines and Skagway. Winds will kind of be opposed at each other, 15 to 25 knots on either direction, about 3 to 5 feet there. So watch for that shift there as the frontal boundary is still working and sweeping through the region. As we get into Saturday, more of a uniform flow. They're still looking at southerlies on the coastal waters, some of those up to 40 knots now at 21 to 24 feet as you head out toward the Dixon entrance. A south and southeasterly flow coming through the inner channels, 15 to 30 feet with seas as high as 11 feet toward some of the ocean entrances there down toward the Dixon entrance. For south central, you can see the big impacts from the northerly flow sweeping across the Kenai Peninsula and the Kodiak Island area, as well as inside Prince William Sound. Seas around Prince William Sound, inside and outside, between 30 and 40 knots, 3 to 6 foot seas on the inside, up to 9 foot seas on the outside. Those are all coming up during the day. And around the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay area, 30 to 35 knot winds. That also comes with the threat for some freezing spray, not only in the Cook Inlet, but also on the Seward and areas out around Resurrection Bay and out toward Kodiak Island. So keep that in mind as you're planning your day. For Saturday, winds begin to shift behind the frontal boundary as low pressure parks up very close to Whittier once again. You can see the effects that's having on the wind, drawing the wind into it. A southwesterly flow then shifts around the Resurrection Bay area and outside of Seward. Southwesterlies also outside of Prince William Sound, more of a south and easterly flow inside Prince William Sound, and northeasterlies on the northern side of the Cook Inlet with stronger westerly flow coming into the Kenai Peninsula and across the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay Area, 40 knots south of Kodiak. Northerlies on Friday across the Alaska Peninsula, freezing spray a threat in all areas there, 25 to 35 knots. On the north side, 6 to 13 foot seas. On the south side, 8 to 12 foot seas are expected. As we get into Saturday, a northwesterly shift for all regions, 35 to 40 knot winds with the strongest winds on the south side of the peninsula, looking at 13 foot seas there with freezing spray as an issue going into the weekend. Northerlies across the eastern parts of the Aleutians will keep freezing spray a threat there. 17 foot seas there north of Unalaska and Nikolsky. More of a north and easterly flow develops and the winds diminish somewhat for the central and western parts of the chain. As we get into Saturday, you'll notice very little change there, some very subtle changes around areas south of the chain in the east with a 30-knot flow from the north and west, and winds diminish a little bit more out across the western parts of the chain west of Kiska. You're looking at 20 knots with a 12-foot sea on Saturday. Along the west coast, northerly winds are pretty much ruling the roost as we go into the weekend. A northerly flow from 30 knots to as high as 40 knots down around the Pribilofs with a 14-foot sea. Freezing spray possible in all areas there as we get into Saturday. Very little change, a little bit the speed diminishing from here to there, but not much. We're looking at 10 to 12-foot seas and 30 to 35 knot winds as we start up the weekend. Across the north slope, light winds mainly from Barrow to points east with a north and westerly flow developing there. Otherwise, stronger northerly flow from Point Lay southward going directly into the Seward Peninsula at 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. On Saturday, you'll notice winds not really changing too much, more of a westerly flow at 10 knots across the Beaufort Seacoast, and winds coming in from the north from Barrow all the way down toward Shishmaref as high as 30 knots again with 5 to 8-foot seas there. Recapping tonight's weather, rain and snow continues for southeast. All of your warnings have expired. However, a new winter storm watch is posted for the Haynesboro and the Klondike Highway area as they head into the weekend there. Another round of heavy snow is developing for you. This warm surge will come into the cold and dry air across south central Alaska with winter weather advisories for the Copper River Basin and the Anchorage Bowl as we go into Friday afternoon and Saturday. Some areas could be looking as much as 10 inches of snow around Anchorage and sizable snow amounts there for the Copper River Basin as well. Low pressure will continue to park on the western side of Prince William Sound with another round of snow and rain headed for northern parts of southeast to start up the weekend. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.